I have a bunch of slides to show you, partly because I think my world is best expressed in pictures. And I'm going to just actually start off, I guess the first one was up there, by telling you basically the end of the talk. And the end of the talk is that I have had the privilege of 2 flights on the shuttle, 6 months on the space station almost, and I would have stayed another 6 months in a minute. But looking back and seeing this view, it's very clear that I'm on a space station. I'm with the crew. We've got really important work to do, and if we don't do it, no one else will do it. But now look at it from my point of view, and actually that's not me in the picture. This is Tracy Caldwell, who took this extraordinary picture that I think is the epitome of a human and their relationship with the Earth. But when you look at that picture, you see that from our point of view, we look out and we see another spaceship, and that is the spaceship Earth, and that means that you are the crew. So I'll talk a little bit about what that has meant to me. There's sort of the usual astronaut kind of stuff. We think of spacesuits. I'm very proud to have my spacesuit up on the space station. I never got to go outside. Unfortunately, nothing broke that was expensive or dangerous. And I really would have loved to have done that, but I was very proud as the smallest person actually to be qualified in the spacesuit for the space station. And it took a lot of hard work and cheerfully showing up when no one expected you to. I'm happy to talk about those things sometime. I flew on the space shuttle. This is my second mission. The woman in the middle is Eileen Collins. She's the first woman commander of the space station, and actually featured in Time magazine this week. There's that, I think it's called The Firsts, Women Who Were First, and she was the first woman commander. Extraordinary woman, and I learned so much about leadership from her and from others. And I'll spend most of my time talking about the space station. This is a very special photograph because whenever you see the space shuttle on the left there and the space station together, there's only one time that has ever been seen by human beings, and that is 3 of us who were in our Russian Soyuz backing away from the space station on our way to land on the Earth after our 6-month mission. And so Paolo Nespoli from Italy took that picture and the video. And so every time you see that configuration, it's a very special time, at least in my history. We do all these things as a crew, and I'm going to talk a lot about crew dynamics and about what that means in terms of getting a job done and what it means for us who are all both excited and challenged by the passions that we have. In the middle, and this picture represents our whole crew, really excited about going to space. So, I mean, the guy in the back, that's Sasha Kaleri with the mustache. I mean, there's a hint of a smile there, right? My crewmate, Dmitry Kondratyev, in the center. Now, I don't actually say this to make fun of Dmitry, but it's actually been a really important lesson for me. This is a picture of Dmitry Kondratyev ready to go to space and so excited about it. And you can look on the internet and you will see that face exactly like that every time. And yet, and it's hard for me as a talker, as a sharer, as somebody trying to sort of lead the crew sometimes from behind or many times from behind, to realize that the non-responsive face that is looking at me is actually excited, listening, and taking in my point of view. And it's a really important lesson about, how do we get the job done? So a quick video, it's about 3.5 minutes long or so, just to kind of show you some things about what it was like up there. I just think the medium of video, of having things be a little bit alive, is important for people to see. Often when I talk, I have to show video like this. This is the space station. It looks like animation, but it's real. It's pretty thrilling to me that it's really real. And of course, we have much better 4K video now. This is us getting ready for training, and we're doing some getting ready. You can see how the Soyuz is very, very small, and that's when you can be very sympathetic, like, oh, isn't that small? And the suit is very, very big, if you're me. And so it weighs about 300 pounds. But now we fast forward to launch night. And I'm signing the door of the room that I stayed in. I'm launching from Kazakhstan, from Baikonur. I'm waving to my family, my husband and my son. My son was 10 at that time. And we're doing pressure checks, all those kinds of things. We agreed as a crew we would take small steps and short ones and slowly. And if you see the whole thing, you realize I am like running to the launch pad. But part of the reason I have to show this in a normal talk is because there's something really unbelievable, I think, about being an astronaut. I mean, I tell people, not all the time, not on every plane ride, but, and they say, if I say, you know, I'm an astronaut, they go, a real one? Yes, a real one. and you know, and I think it doesn't actually happen to the guys as much. And it's both, it's sort of both a way to really make some really great points in a way. And this is my favorite part of the whole movie, even though you see my butt, okay? But that is what life is like up there. It's a whole new world. We have these images because we saw them so much of sort of fuzzy video of people kind of floating and big hair and things like that. And really, it is a giant palace of 10 train cars put together without the seats in them. There is enormous room, and you fly everywhere. And it's really good for hair. And actually, those white cranes that we made, we were up there during the Japanese tsunami. And we had just captured the Japanese supply ship. And their mission control was actually affected. Their families were very affected. And we had trained for years with these folks that worked in mission control. And so it was really an emotional time for all of us. And one way to do our part was we said we want to take pictures of Japan. And you know, at night, during the day, so that we can gather the data. And they said, well, you know, during the day, it's going to be when you're supposed to be sleeping, so you can't do that. We're like, we just want to know what time it's going to be. And we figured things out on the maps, and actually that data was quite valuable in understanding the state of the systems about light and power and flooding in Japan. It's a really interesting vantage point up there, and it's an important one. It's different. We have lots of interesting and important vantage points here as well, especially if we listen to ourselves and the things that we see and we share them. But we certainly have a special one up there. This is the arrival of the space shuttle. It was one of the last space shuttles, and they are bringing the last module to attach to the space station. And I was one of the robotics people. We used the robotic arm to actually grab that module. This is the crew coming aboard. It's like a family. This is my friend Nicole. I mean, we all know each other. I think every one of the astronauts, really back to the beginning of at least the US space program, and many of the foreign astronauts as well, we're like one giant family. Even if our countries don't all play together and talk to each other and use each other's technology, going to space like this, it's just such a privilege, and it's so special that we're bound forever by that experience. The robot is the one on the left. I was up there with Scott Kelly, and he recently spent a year up in space, and all of us were actually amazingly jealous and at the same time supportive of his mission. But he and I spent about 4 months together, and then his brother actually came up on the shuttle after that. So I got to actually be up there with both of them, which was kind of interesting because we have kind of a closer personal space because it's really loud up there. And so I would be really close to who I thought was Scott, even though I know it wasn't Scott, but I'm really close. And then he would look at me, and I would look at him, and I go, you're not Scott. He's like, no. So it's kind of an interesting human part. Okay, I'm seeing the clock. I'm moving along. A little bit about science experiments. This is why we do them. Not because they're fun. I mean, they are very fun, but that shows you how even eating is a science experiment. But we have a different lens on life.
And Jeff is a Navy pilot, so he wanted to play with water.
You could turn the sound down, thanks, until we get to that one slide. And so we get to see, what do liquids really want to do? And that's something we can find out up there. We get to understand things about combustion that are almost impossible to find out down here, because measurements that have to be made very quickly down here can be made very slowly because those lighter gases are not rising and making that sort of pointy flame. And so we have a different way of looking at things that shows us things we can't see down here. And what's fascinating to me is that a lot of the things that we're discovering and actually on purpose really pursuing are how to recirculate all of our water, recirculate all of our air, grow plants in a place where it's hard to grow them. That's important for Mars, but that's important for Earth as well, for sustainable Earth. So dual purpose, and we're sort of often using the fact that space is sort of sexy, people want to do stuff for space. If it's for the space program, boy, they will jump through hoops and they will make it happen. And the great thing is that it has great consequences for Earth here. The osteoporosis research that we do, I'm quite proud of. We lose bone about 10 times faster than a woman who has osteoporosis, who's 70 years old. So what she loses in a year, I lose in a month if I don't do something about it. And so we're learning a lot about what causes that and how it works. I myself came back with all of my bone density, and it's because of what we've learned. There is some good news in that we can understand things better, and the bad news is that exercise is here to stay, because it's a really big part of the answer. The view of the Earth, and I'm sharing this for a reason. I want you to think about perspective. We talked about how you can see the Earth, and we look back, and it's really clear to us that we are the crew, all of us. And when you're 6 people up there, it's really easy to know that if one of the 6 of you doesn't do something, it is not going to happen. But it's a little bit easier down here to think that somebody else either might do it, or maybe somebody else should do it, because I'm not sure that I'm really the right one, or I'm not sure that I'm really good enough to do that. And so I think it's really important to realize that this view has a very powerful multiplying factor. We see things like storms. It's hard, actually, emotionally, to know that everybody underneath that amazing-looking hurricane cloud, it's very beautiful, and at the same time, there's just such devastation. There's the boot of Italy, so Italy indeed shaped like a boot. Those of us who buy books like Don't Know Much About Geography are very encouraged to see things that look just like the map. In fact, when I first went up to space, I went with a guy from Massachusetts, and that was the first thing he said when we saw Massachusetts. He goes, "Oh my God, it looks just like the map." So I show you New England. I mean, if you look to the left, there's New York, there's Long Island, and it's a little bit easier to find your way around sometimes in the winter if there's snow and ice, and so you can see the Hudson River, that's big river running up the middle there. You can see the Connecticut River, you can see Cape Cod and Massachusetts and Newport and Providence, and I live up in Western Mass, and so that reservoir right sort of in the sort of middle right, that sort of forked thing, that is the Quabbin Reservoir, which gives Boston all its water, and that's where, near there is where home is for me. So I reference every picture to the Quabbin. And every place looks different, in different light. Some of it's amazing. But I want to come back to this idea of perspective. And Saul, so I'm looking at the clock. It says 1:43. I'm not going to make it. It's okay? Okay. We're going to go probably 7 more minutes. Okay. I mean, I hate to be in between us and beer. I mean, it's important to me too. And it's been a long day, so I'm just going to show you some pictures. But there's a little lesson in the middle here that's important. And that is just the idea of learning to look at people and things a little bit differently. We've heard so many wonderful talks, and I have enjoyed every minute of them and written copious notes. And I mean, I found myself in every one of these talks today. But I'm hoping you can find yourself a little bit in this one. When you just saw those views of the Earth, when I see something amazing like that, I think I must be up and looking out, kind of like a widow's walk on a house. But think again about the space station and the Earth. So we can't actually be up, because we'd be like not seeing the Earth. We have to be actually down. And I never actually got over that one. I just would have to like fly through the module where the cupola was and do a 180 and just say, okay, I'm here. And on the way out, I'd do another one and I'd say, okay, now I'm back. And looking at that, I want you to take a little look on Unperceptive. So if you look at this picture, then you see there's a bunch of people in it, and we see like kind of 2 guys, or is it 3 at the bottom. And now I want you to kind of turn yourself on your side there and look a little bit sort of upside down. And do you see me? So now you see me, but now now put your head straight. We're looking at that picture. Now look at this one. Now you see me. And we've learned, astronauts know, do not be the upside down one in the crew picture. Because you won't be seen, right? But it's not about that crew picture. I mean, look at this picture. You know, on the bottom, we clearly see on the left in the maroon, there's Tracy Caldwell. On the right, Stephanie Wilson, aeronautical engineer. Tracy's a chemist. And we don't really see much of the people on the top. But there we have Dottie, she has a big, long Metcalf Linenberger, who's a teacher turned astronaut, and Naoko Yamazaki from Japan, the second Japanese woman astronaut, who's an aeronautical engineer. So now let's look at this picture. And this is, I did actually illegally take this picture of the screen during the screening. Hidden Figures. I loved this movie, and I saw it a number of times, not just for work, but it's really, I just think that if every single person would go and see this movie with an open mind, we would have a different planet. I mean, we talk about hidden figures. Look at this picture. Not only is she a woman of color in a sea of white men with skinny black ties, which they still wear at NASA, by the way, some of them, but she's a woman in a bright-colored dress. I mean, there's nothing about her that is hidden in this picture, is there? And yet she was, because we just didn't see her. And I say we because I didn't know the existence of these several hundred women for a long time. And the fact that they could have done this work, no one hid them on purpose. It just wasn't the way we were used to looking. And that's why I showed you those pictures of upside down, right side up, and it's kind of funny, and at the same time, it's kind of a black and white way to say, you've got to look again. You have to look again at the people that are next to you. I mean, in this picture, I usually show it at the end of my talks, not quite the end yet, Saul. And because I stick out in this picture, first of all, we had a miscommunication. I was told to wear like that blue jacket, black pants, all those things very clearly. Every appearance that we're going to have in Washington, I showed up in that outfit. They were all dressed in these dark suits, and Mark looked at Scott and goes, "You didn't tell her." And Scott's like, nah, nah, nah. And anyways, and so I put on like the only thing in my suitcase that was decent enough. I happened to stick out in this picture. It wasn't on purpose, but I tell people no one knew when I was in 3rd grade or when I was Talik's age or any time that I would be one of the people in this picture. And that's why we have to make sure that all of them are ready. And in order to do that, we're going to have teams that make us individuals. That really acknowledge the fact that we are individuals. I'm a flute player. I played in high school. I loved to play. I was never, no one ever wanted to send me to the Royal Academy of anything musical, I will tell you. But I really loved to play. I loved Carl's remarks. I learned to improvise actually in Norway. From see? Thank you, Carl. I mean, it was, the guy who taught language when I was an exchange student in the first 2 weeks I was there, he says, "You should play music with me, Cady. You play the flute." I go, "Well, I don't know how to do that." And he goes, "I'm going to show you 3 chords. You're smart. You can remember them. And you know what notes are in the scale? When you play those notes, it's going to work. Let's go." And I've played improvisationally ever since, and it's really thanks to that one person who taught me to be a little bit brave about it. And I had to be a lot brave to play up there. I brought 4 flutes, 2 for the band The Chieftains. It's an 150-year-old flute, Irish flute, and a tin whistle. And I've gotten to play with them since I've been back. And this is the flute of Ian Anderson, who I really admired for bringing the flute to rock music, which I think took a little bravery himself. I think they had very nice sound engineers. Philip, your sound engineer, I think, helped with this one. I actually really might have. So this is Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. And we'd never met when we did this. This duet takes place on the 12th of April, which is the 50th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's first flight. He was playing a concert in Russia. I was on the space station, and we put this together. So it was really a pretty amazing thing.
Thanks, Colonel Catherine Coleman in the International Space Station. We should remember that today's cosmonauts, scientists, and astronauts are still every bit the rocket heroes they were 50 years ago. So, from the cultural city of Perm in Russia, let's salute Cady, Dima, and Paolo up there in orbit, and of course, the legendary Yuri Gagarin. Go safely.
So. But I think every one of us that stands on the stage, feels that way. You have somebody, when you have this kind of collaboration, and it happens in the lobby, it happens in the hotel, it happens during the breaks here, it happens when you sit down, or you kind of wanted someone else to sit there, and someone else shows up, and you're like, well, I guess so. I mean, these are the conversations where somebody has to be open and somebody has to be brave, and sometimes you each actually have to be both. To be open to what people have to say, and at the same time, be brave enough to say that, I think that I might have something that you might want to hear or need to hear, or I just like you to hear it in case it connects with something that you do, so that together we actually can do something more than what we can do alone. So my quick example of doing this is during the eclipse, of thinking, when can I make a difference and how? Because now I'm retired in December, and so I have a few more months on Walt, but I don't think I could qualify to be an expert on retirement yet either. And I am actually seriously sort of searching and trying to figure out, what is it that I'd like to spend my time on, having done the things that you saw in those pictures. I'm lucky enough to have a certain sort of mantle of credibility, and it means that I can be useful. And so what do I use that for? And this is something that happened this summer, which I think a lot of people might have seen, was the eclipse. And I was selected, or was asked to be one of 4 people to kind of be CNN's people across the country. There were 4 of us that watched the eclipse and had people watch with us in 360 video. And this could have been the story right here. I mean, I was honored to be picked. It was actually sponsored content by Volvo, so it was actually Volvo and their ad agency that picked these 4 people. It was myself, it was Andy Weir that wrote The Martian, it was the head of the Explorers Club in New York City, and a woman who was an Egyptologist. And so it was really great company to be in, and a wonderful thing to be asked to do this. But my thought was, okay, so it's an amazing event that the US is finally, because it's happening in the US, we all notice. It's not always our skill to notice around the world, right? But a lot of people will be watching this. What else can we get done? I mean, it's one thing to look at me for that 12 minutes, but why can't we look at some other people so that we can actually just make more ripples? And so I asked CNN and the advertising agency to include basically, at least 5 or 6 girls and my family. I did a lot of things in space, and I've gone a lot of places, I've done a lot of great training, and so much of it is without my family, and I just said, I want my family to be there, not in the film, turned out they were, but actually to come with me. And so we have these amazing Girl Scouts from Eastern Missouri, and it really added, I thought it would complicate things. It was an astounding amount of complication to add a bunch of kids from all different backgrounds, who had all different interests, and it was 96 degrees out. I mean, it was really hard what we did. And we got to do this thing together. We assigned roles. I found out 24 hours before that I would have a lesson ready for the Girl Scouts. I was like, really? And so, and there's also Jack, who's my friend there on the, he was a boy who wrote to NASA. NASA was advertising for the head of planetary protection. And Jack volunteered to take that job because he felt very qualified. And so that made a lot of news. But again, it's a way, when you look at this picture, so many people get to see somebody else that really relates to them. Candidly, I would have wished to have more differences in the picture, but this was as far as I could get with the time that we had to get things ready. And so we did this amazing thing together. We saw a solar eclipse. We saw the girls learned things. I told them to write observations. Some of them were timers. Even when the thing really starts and you have to hit a timer. I mean, this girl who was 11 years old hit that timer every time in rehearsal and every time when it really, really counted. And it was actually the most important timer to make sure we all put our glasses back on. The girl that was, had the most questions and was really sort of, I don't know, but it was a little hard for her to really kind of keep track and be with everybody. And she was scribbling on her paper and someone wanted to throw it away. This is her drawing of the eclipse. She's an artist. So I really just was so proud of the work that this crew, this CNN crew, I mean, the advertising agency was brave, Volvo was brave, CNN was brave, the people the crew that made it happen. And so it's just a way of showing you how much of a difference we can really make. And I think that in, sort of large media things that are going to make a big splash, if you can influence that and get more faces in there, get more ideas in there. I mean, it's popular media. A lot of people see it. It's a secret channel to send messages. Messages of inclusion. I mean, kids see a movie like this, I mean, they're going to think that it's like normal to go to Mars. And when we advertised for astronauts, before this movie came out, we had 6,500 applications. The Martian came out, we had 18,000. An increase of a factor of 3 in just 2 or 3 years. I applied in 1992, and in over 20-some years, it increased by a factor of 3. This movie, I think, did that. So we have this power. And so now we think about what we'd like to do here. I mean, it all comes back to Earth. Comes back to where we live. There aren't countries that you can really see up there. There's a few. But but you can see home, and home is something that's really important. It's beautiful. I mean, it was amazing to have the views from space, but it's really amazing to have them from Earth. This is this is where I live in Western Massachusetts. I think it's familiar landscape here in Providence as well. But it's really, it's family, it's home. It's not about whether you have kids or not, but there's people and things that are just home to you, where you just feel like yourself. And you have to think about, who they are, and you gather them to you. And I think all of us are meeting new ones here at BIF. There's a lot of, I guess the last part of me that is I'm always struggling to figure out where to put it is the mom part. I mean, it's not, my husband sent me this picture from the place where we reported in for launch, and certainly it was one of the times that I cried up on orbit. I mean, it's really hard to leave your family. It's hard for all of us on our missions to leave our families behind. And yet, in our case, I left him with his trusty cat. It's a very confused Maine Coon cat that thinks he's a dog. But both the boy and the cat have grown up fine. He's 17. Junior in high school. And I come supported by a husband, artist guy who's a nut, but explores in his own way. And I really like to make that point that it takes a village for me. I mean, I think it's clear in the first 15 minutes when you meet me that I need a village. And, he's got his own talents and his own way of exploring. He makes glass planets, which people give us a hard time about. He made them a dozen years before we ever met. But now you know why I married him, because I have wedding presents for life. And I might have, when we got to bring a few special things up to the space station, I did, of course, bring a few. But, and I know I'm prejudiced because we're married, and yet, I think that you should, find people that really sort of, you collaborate with, that think the same way. I mean, he explores, he thinks that, when you look at these planets, I mean, these are clearly interesting places. When they have little geometric places on them, somebody else has already been there, and they've been busy. And in that imagination and science fiction, that is what really fuels us. We have to have people that have the vision, and they're not necessarily the ones that know how to design the spaceships, or the spacesuits, or the food, or all those things. We need the people that provide the visions, because we have places to go, both in space and on Earth. And so we need people who have this spirit. Don't ever lose that spirit. And as the Blue Lobster lady mentioned, let's make sure that we cultivate all the blue lobsters. And just the fact that people have ideas, and they might need that. They might need your encouragement to bring out those ideas, because this is our place, and you are the crew. There's some special places to go watch it from, but you are the crew of Spaceship Earth. Thank you.